pixel artistry. Now this video is mainly going to be about how the archaeology system might function and less about the items that you might get from it. But if you are interested in a video like that, I could make an archaeology treasure concept video sometime in the future. So let's start this video off with the brush. This is an entirely new tool, and the Mojang team member Olraf has actually been looking into other uses that the brush could present as well. This is pretty big news because over time the brush could actually have many unique and amazing functions. Now I think what I'm about to say is already somewhat widely known, but if you take a look at this picture from the Caves and Cliffs video, you'll notice that one brush is a brown type color and a bit shiny, while the other one is more of a green. Now we all know what's being added to the game that consists of both these colors, don't we? Yup. So it seems to me that the brush handle will be made of copper, and the recipe could also make use of the feather, possibly even be crafted like this. This is great because it gives another use to copper as well as the feather. I'm also sure that the brushes will have durability just like every other tool, but since copper and feathers are pretty common, it should be easily repairable. But I think that the brushes being able to oxidize is actually going to play a bigger role in archaeology than we all may think at first. We all know that the faster a tool is, seemingly the better it is, right? Well, the brush is supposedly going to change that, because Mojang has actually talked about that the slower a brush is, the more useful it is to the player, because you want to be careful and take your time when brushing away dirt or gravel, as to not break any items in these excavation sites. I would also like to mention that Mojang has actually said that it is highly unlikely for the archaeology blocks to contain items like diamond blocks within them, and that basically the diamond block that we saw at Minecraft Live was a placeholder for other items. I imagine that this would also apply to the emerald block that we saw as well. Mojang has also said that they are much more invested in adding new items to these excavation sites rather than items that you can find anywhere, and this is wonderful news. However, I'm going to go ahead and use the diamond for a few of my examples in this video because it's just so shiny. I mean, even the warden can appreciate a good diamond. Anyway, so currently with the way that the archaeology concept was presented at Minecraft Live, the way that the brushing mechanic works is that you want to stop brushing the dirt or gravel block as soon as the layer is right underneath the item. Brush any more than that or less than that and the item will break and be gone forever, just like we saw in the Caves and Cliffs video. Now let's jump back to the idea that the oxidation of the brushes could actually play a pretty big role in all of this. I think that when you first craft one of the brushes, it will brush the blocks at the quickest pace out of all the other brushes because it hasn't oxidized yet. So basically, the more oxidation a brush has on it, the slower it will become and the slower it will brush away layers of dirt and gravel. My logic behind this idea is that similar to real life, oxidation leaves a rougher texture on copper after it has oxidized, therefore allowing the player to have a better grip on the brush and allow for slower brushing. And of course, the slowest brush is the fully oxidized one, making it the most useful. I really like this idea because it makes each oxidation stage feel more distinct from one another. It almost would feel like over time you were actually learning alongside of your brush, because the more experienced that you become, the more oxidized your brush becomes. And I think that would make the brush an even more unique tool. But hey, let's say that you become a seasoned archaeologist and you know how to effectively use a brush quickly and still get the treasure. Therefore, you don't want to be slowed down and you just want the quickest brush. Imagine if you could wax whatever oxidation stage of the brushes that you preferred to play with. That way the brush would no longer oxidize and you could choose whatever oxidation stage that you wanted to use. This would cater to all different types of archaeology playstyles. And in recent snapshots, you can actually use an axe to remove the wax from copper blocks if you want the blocks to continue to oxidize. The same principles could apply to the brushes. If you wanted to remove the wax, you could just simply put the brush in a crafting table with an axe, and the wax would be removed. Then the brush can oxidize again. Now, while we all know archaeology is still being worked on as a feature, the current implementation of how you successfully retrieve the items in archaeology is fun. Brushing right up until the point that the layer is right underneath the artifact does add some timing to the archaeology system, but I feel like the act of brushing a block can be made more engaging, kinda like an arcade game. What if when you started brushing a block, a new type of bar showed up, almost like a sensitivity bar? So these gold pixels here is what you want to remain inside of the green bar, and when you begin brushing a block, the green bar will start moving. And your goal is to follow the green bar with your mouse by simply aiming your brush at the direction on the block that the green bar is at. You could also add in Mojang's timing game of making sure to stop brushing once the layer is underneath the item for more of a challenge. Also, maybe not only would a more oxidized brush slow down how quickly the layers would reduce, but also slow down how quickly the green bar would move, therefore giving you more control. You also wouldn't want to stay out of the green bar for too long, or else the block and item could break and be gone forever. Perhaps we could also add the water bucket into the equation here. Let's say that the more high quality an item is, the more challenging it is to successfully obtain it. So let's say that this time around that our player is brushing a block and a water bucket symbol appears. This would indicate that you need to use your water bucket to wash away any particles on the block. And to do this successfully, all you would need to do was to switch to your water bucket and crouch or sneak to use it, because you'd still need to be holding down the key that you used to start brushing the block. And once again, if you took too long to react to an indication, the item and block would break. But if you reacted quickly, you would resume as normal. This process would continue until the dirt or gravel layer was underneath the item. Then you would stop brushing and successfully retrieve the item. I really like this idea because it adds even more timing and skill mechanics to the archaeology system. Also, imagine if it was raining while you were brushing a block. You wouldn't need to use a bucket of water if the block was exposed to the rain, since the rain would wash away any particles that the water bucket would have. Maybe you would end up heading straight to your excavation site if it started raining, so that way you could use the rain to your benefit. This would make rain a valuable event in the game that you might end up looking forward to. Also, as many of you know, the Caves and Cliffs update was split into 2 parts to give the features more time to be worked on. And this is totally understandable. Mojang should take all the time that they need to take care of themselves and take all the time that they need to work on these features. Now at this time, archaeology has been postponed the most out of all of these features. The reason for this is because it's an entirely new system and Mojang wants to take the time to give archaeology the time it deserves to be worked on. The Mojang team wants to take the time to make archaeology fun and Minecrafty, and this is great news. I really think that archaeology has so much potential and I'm very excited to see where it goes. Okay, so my next idea is actually regarding this block of obsidian right here, and you may be wondering why. So to prepare for this video, I was rewatching the archaeology clip from Minecraft Live, and I noticed that there was a fair amount of obsidian just laying around the excavation site. I didn't think much of it until I saw Olaf actually hit the block of obsidian with the brush, as you can see right here by the falling particles. I'm also assuming that the person playing is Olaf, I don't know. But what this told me is that potentially Olaf wanted to interact with the block of obsidian but wasn't able to, possibly because they didn't have the correct tool. So I present to you the chisel. I was actually thinking that it could be cool if you could only find the chisel in a dirt or gravel block. This would almost feel like leveling up and gaining access to the stone blocks that you previously couldn't interact with. You would also need to spend a certain amount of time in the excavation sites before you were even able to find the chisel. That way, you couldn't just go straight to the stone blocks that contained even more unique and rare treasures and items. So with this idea, the chisel wouldn't actually even be craftable, and in my opinion, I really like the idea of more items that must be found and earned instead of just being able to simply be crafted. This gives you a sense of progression as well when you find the chisel, making it feel like a reward that you've been doing well as an archaeologist, therefore unlocking another archaeology stage for you to interact with. And if you were concerned about finding too many chisels that you would have no use for, you could simply keep one in your inventory, and that would tell the game that you don't want to dig up any more chisels because you already have one. Also, the same oxidation principles that apply to the brush would also apply to the chisels because it would be partially made of copper. So the more oxidized that a chisel is, the more steady your player is. I'd also like to mention that in this concept, you'd always find an unoxidized chisel because it would have been covered by dirt or gravel, therefore away from oxygen, so it wouldn't have been able to oxidize, and this makes it feel like a new and unused tool. Maybe another archaeologist lost it or forgot that it was here a long time ago. Maybe a long time ago, a treasure became encased in obsidian or stone and is ready to be discovered by you. I also realize that diamond is used to break obsidian, but we aren't trying to retrieve any obsidian, only break it away. Because you can technically use an iron pickaxe to break away obsidian. Maybe you can use a wood pickaxe, I don't know. All the pickaxes. I also really like using amethyst for this because it gives it another use, and I'm all for giving items more uses. But when using the chisel on a stone-type block, such as obsidian, another timing game will begin, only this time you will need to use the water bucket, brush, and chisel, because in this concept, more valuable items would, more valuable items would be encased in stone, and needing to use all 3 tools would make this more challenging. Basically, you want to use the same principles as the first sensitivity bar game, and stay in the green bar, until a symbol shows up giving you an indication to quickly use your chisel on the spot by crouching or sneaking, just like when you use the water bucket. But every now and then the symbol will change and you'll need to use the brush to sweep away any particles on the block and even use your water bucket when you're indicated to do so. And this process continues until the stone or obsidian layer is directly underneath the item and you let go to successfully retrieve the item once again. And like I said, perhaps more valuable items could appear in these stone or obsidian blocks since there doesn't seem to be very many at the excavation site in Minecraft Live. That could also give you incentive to make sure that you were extra careful when working on the stone blocks. I also actually have another concept for something that you could find at these excavation sites. And as we can see in this display case here, there is an archaeology book that someone lost at this excavation site a long time ago. Now, what would this archaeology book do? Basically, it would expand your player's knowledge of archaeology archaeology and would increase the excavation site's chances of containing rare loot and treasure. But you would need to put the book in a display case in order to preserve it, and almost like a beacon, the book would give you an effect called Archaeologist. You would also need to be in range of the book in order for it to work, and that wouldn't really be a problem as you would only really need to use it at the excavation sites. I like the implementation of this idea because it feels like the player is studying old archaeology notes and becoming more skilled and discovering increasingly rare treasures. There could even be more archaeology books that could give you other effects. Maybe one of the books could make you more likely to successfully obtain an artifact, or another book would allow you to make more mistakes without breaking the artifact. And acquiring all of the books would make you the most effective archaeologist that you could be. Fun stuff like that. This idea would add more decorative items to the game as well, and you wouldn't need to put the book in a display case unless you wanted the archaeologist effect. This also gives the display case an interesting function. Also, myself and many others have been hoping for a type of display case for displaying your items. Maybe if you wanted the item to spin in the case, you could simply pull this cork type handle here and it would allow airflow into the case, making the item spin. But when you close the cork handle, the item will stop spinning right when you do so, allowing you to choose the precise position of the item, therefore adding some customization to this feature. Now, next up is probably going to be one of the best decorative items in archaeology, the clay pots. You may notice that I custom designed these clay pots because the clay pots in the first archaeology announcement video was actually programmer art, so we don't really know how they're actually going to look. You also might notice that there aren't actually really any shards on these pots that really tell a story like they talked about in the Caves and Cliffs video. The reason for this is because I actually don't really know what kind of stories Mojang is going to implement into the clay pots. And since Mojang does know the stories that they're going to implement already, I'm just going to wait and see how the storytelling side of the clay pots is presented. But another use for the brush could actually be used to custom paint your own clay pot however you like, and even tell one of your own stories on it. Being able to customize your own clay pot would add a lot more unique value to this feature, and it's something that I would personally really enjoy adding to my projects in the game. Now, as far as uses for the clay pot, it would be cool if you could store a few items in the pot, but not a whole lot of items because the pots would seemingly have less room in them than other storage methods. It could also make an interesting addition to the game if pots ended up generating in other structures with a limited amount of items. Probably just some food or something somewhat useful, nothing too rare. But it could be a fun addition to the game if a pot had a low percentage of containing something rare. I guess it would also depend on how much clay pots would end up showing up in structures as well. Just a thought, I guess. Also, if you put a plant on top of a clay pot, maybe the inventory of the pot would no longer be accessible because it would then be blocked. Maybe the only way to access the pot's inventory once again would be to use a pair of shears on the plant. This kind of adds a more secretive way to hide any items that you choose, and also adds a bit of a simple layer of security. But I guess you could just break the pot and get everything from it. But that is already how chests work. I'm still liking the potential.